how's it going, guys? Bringing the whiteboard back for this video, and what I want to discuss with you guys in this one here is anti-gravity propulsion schemes. Now there's a couple reasons why I want to do this video on this topic. One of those reasons is because I am doing a whole lot of research for a webinar I have coming up on the Secret Space program. You can check the description below this video if you want to go check it out. And another reason I want to do this video is because there's been a lot of talk lately about the Trump administration declassifying exotic technologies. So what I want to do in this video is familiarize you guys with some of the information behind that, how it's been suppressed for a very long time, and how technologies and sciences like anti-gravity are a very real thing. So let's get into it. We're going to talk about the technology of tomorrow that we should have had 60 years ago. And what I'm going to do is go through 3 different concepts with you guys. Now, they're all separate, but they're all very linked as well. And it all involves a whole brand new system of physics and essentially framework of science that we're all going to have to learn, right? There's a whole lot of brainwashing that's been going on from mainstream science that we're going to have to unlearn. But of course, I'm not a, super trained physicist by any means. I'm just giving you some rough basics in this video. Although this stuff extremely fascinates me. I'm going to continue researching it and getting better at discussing the technicalities of it all. And a lot of other people out there are far better at discussing the technicalities of it. So again, you can check the description below this video. I'm going to post some various links and videos and articles where you can go continue doing more research than what I can just offer in this simple YouTube video. So let's get into it. Anti-gravity propulsion. The first topic we're going to go into is called electrogravitics. Now, this term was invented by a man named Thomas Townsend Brown. He was an inventor in the early 1900s, and he was fascinated by Albert Einstein's general relativity theories, but he knew there was more to it, right? He figured there was some kind of link between electricity and gravity because he knew there was a link between matter and gravity, and there's a link between matter and electricity. So thus, there needs to be a link between electricity and gravity, and he found that. And the term that was, or I should say the scientific theory that was named after him basically was called the Biefeld-Brown effect. It's called the Biefeld-Brown effect because he was working with another scientist named Paul Biefeld. And funny enough, Paul Biefeld was a classmate of Albert Einstein's. And they derived this Biefeld-Brown effect through various experiments with electricity and metal. Basically, what T. Townsend Brown and his cohort here found out was that when you charge basically anything that can have an electric charge to it, when you put a high voltage electrostatic charge into that material, it can actually counter gravity. And this led him to say that the universe is nothing more than an assemblage of energy. It's pretty much an archetypal understanding that all the best scientists and especially physicists all figured out. Everything is simply energy. The secrets of the universe is energy, as Nikola Tesla said, right? We're going to discuss Tesla in a little bit here. But Thomas Townsend Brown, now the experiments that he did, he first had 2 small metal balls next to each other, and then he made one a high voltage positive charge and the other one a negative charge, which actually caused a little bit of force to go between them, an unknown force to him at the time. So he found this, and then he started working with discs. He worked with a bit larger discs. He had them tethered to a large pole, and then when he did the electrostatic charge into these discs, they started flying around. And he actually, it's publicly known that he did this with very large discs and made them fly at hundreds of miles per hour. This was just on public record, not any of the classified stuff we don't necessarily know about. And you can see my picture here of essentially a flying saucer, because that's what he was doing. He was making flying saucers. One side would have the positive charge, one side would have the negative charge, and it would move in the direction of whatever positive charge there was. And he actually patented this work in Britain in 1928. A few years later, he then came into America here, and he was able to patent his work in the US in 1957. I'm going to have to kind of shift back and forth here for you guys so you can see it. But anyway, so this is literally patented. You can go look up the name of the patent. So for anybody saying that anti-gravity is a pseudoscience or some kind of conspiracy, they're wrong. And his work ended up in the hands of the MIC, or the Military-Industrial Complex, in the 1950s. They kind of caught wind of it when he began patenting it. He actually Thomas Townsend Brown made a proposal to the US Navy in the mid-50s. Now, there's some disagreements as to what happened from there. One theory is that the Navy actually had already understood the secrets of anti-gravity, had it in their black project, so they kind of shunned T. Townsend Brown away. Another theory is that they brought him into the classified projects, but of course he couldn't publicly say what he was doing, so he had some cover jobs, but consulted secretly for the US Navy. But regardless, his work went into the hands of the military-industrial complex, and they've had it ever since. So understand, the secrets of gravity have been understood for decades. They just haven't been given to us. And there's a lot of reasons for that. We won't get into those discussions here, but they involve money, power, control, yada yada. So that's the basics behind electrogravitics. Understand, gravity is not what we're told, okay? All these mainstream scientists are trying to find gravity through the use of waves. They're trying to use the electromagnetic spectrum to put gravity on. And we'll discuss gravity a little bit more so later, but gravity and electricity are opposites. Electromagnetic radiation is an outward force. Gravity is an inward force. It's a compressive force that's moving into all matter at all times to create it, right? And some scientists understood this. You got Walter Russell out there who understood that gravity and electricity are opposites, and another scientist named Dewey B. Larson, who we'll discuss in a few minutes here, but that's the basics of electricity and gravity and their relationship, and that's why he called it electrogravitics. Some researchers also call it electromagnetogravitics, but I like electrogravitics. It's just simpler and discusses the relationship, how just they're interconnected there. So that's the basics on that. And also it goes to note that with like the flying saucers, there's no, what do I want to say here? There's no opposite reaction. So for instance, when you have rocketry, rockets going up into space, there's an opposite reaction to the thrust being made. So you have a rocket going this way, but you have a huge force going the opposite direction, right? Equal but opposite. When it comes to this kind of concept, playing around with gravity, there's no opposite reaction. So you can have this craft flying through, and there's nothing going against it. It's essentially moving with the ether. And also it goes to note here, this is why, say, secret space program crafts or ET crafts are very particular shapes. They have to either be in a saucer shape, they're in a triangle shape, which we'll discuss in a sec. Sometimes they're in a cigar shape, you'll see, because it's as if they were suspended into fluid, right? A lot of these, quote, pseudoscientists, a lot of these alternative thinkers, the great thinkers, they understand that there's an ether. There's an ether that connects everything, right? And electricity and gravity are simply perturbations, if I have that word right, of this ether. So, and it's a fluid-like medium. So when you have these craft that are beginning to counter gravity, they have to essentially act as if they're in a fluid. So you have to, just imagine the craft's in water, right? And if it doesn't want to sink, if you want to suspend that shape in water, it has to be buoyant. So that's why it has to be saucers or triangles or cigar shapes or rectangles or square type shapes when you're dealing with anti-gravity craft, because they're suspended in a fluid-like medium that is the ether. Okay? Moving on to number 2. Now I want to discuss vortexing mercury, or what's also sometimes called magnetic field disruptors or magnetic gravity cancellation. But this basic technology is a little more advanced, and it's a little different than electrogravitics. And it's actually been around for a lot longer of a time. So we're going to discuss one secret space program craft called the TR-3B. You'll notice it over here in this shape. It's a black triangle. Sometimes it's called a black triangle. And we're also going to discuss ancient Vimanas. And that's what I meant, that this research, this understanding, I should say esoteric research, hidden science, has been around for a long, long time. It's actually been around for thousands of years in ancient scriptures from the Vedas. The Vedas are ancient Indian texts that describe these right here. They were Vimanas, and they essentially used a swirling mercury to counteract gravity with. Now, I'm not too familiar with the ancient Vedic texts, but you can go familiarize yourselves with them and see that this was very real, and they were studied in there. But I want to more focus on the TR-3B, the black triangle. So the TR-3B, and actually both of these, work around a mercury-based plasma that's pressurized and rotated around a circular ring. So in the very middle of these craft, TR-3B right in here, and then you have the Vimana, they would actually have the swirling mercury right in the middle there. When you pressurize and vortex mercury, it creates a superconducting plasma and very highly charged electromagnetic fields. And that's why it's called a magnetic field disruptor, because this magnetic field creates essentially, like I said, an electromagnetic vortex that reduces all the mass within that frame. So say you have the plasma in the middle here, you'll get that magnetic field disruption right around the outside of the craft. Same thing with the Vimana here. But it reduces all the weight within that vortex greatly, a lot. With the TR-3B, this information comes by way of a whistleblower named Edgar Fouche, F-O-U-C-H-E, Fouche. The mass is canceled upwards of almost 90% around that craft. Imagine 90%, right? So I'm 170 pounds. If I only weighed 10% of what I weigh, 17 pounds, and I still had the force that I do to be able to propel myself, I'd be able to jump pretty darn high, right? And here's the amazing thing. Anything in that bubble is corrected for the mass, so they don't feel the G-forces. That's how these craft can shoot across the sky at literally thousands and thousands of miles an hour. And the pilots inside the craft, they don't feel the G-forces. The G-forces are corrected as well. And that also being said, I just had a question a little earlier today. Somebody asked me about the Van Allen belts. They said, oh, if they go, craft go out into space, how do they deal with the highly charged particles of the Van Allen belt hitting the craft? And I said, well, a lot of these craft have electromagnetic propulsion systems that create a vortex around the craft, so they're essentially shielded from it. So that's kind of an answer to that question. And it also goes to note, before we move on to the last one here, is that you can actually combine these two concepts. So if you have a vortexing mercury magnetic field disruptor here, magnetic gravity canceller, you can reduce the mass of the craft by 90%. And shoot, I'd imagine that you could probably do even more than that. Depending on the technology. This is just the information that we have readily available to us right now. But imagine you cancel the mass by 90%, and then you put some electrogravitic systems onto that craft. Well, this 90% mass reduced, and then you have a high electrostatic charge propelling that craft forward. That's going to go pretty darn fast. Because also, it goes to note that I forgot to say up with this one, the idea of electrogravitics, this topic can provide thousands of times more thrust than rocket-propelled craft can. Not only, maybe even hundreds of thousands of times, I think it was said. You can look into Dr. Paul LaVallette's work. He was a studier of T. Towns Brown. He has a good book called The Secrets to Anti-Gravity. And I believe he said it can be like 10,000, even 100,000 times more thrust. So if you can have 10,000 times more thrust than a rocket on a craft, and then reduce the mass of the craft by 90%, well, let me tell you, the secret space programs that the military-industrial complex has, they've been to Mars already. And this is how they've done it. So we went over electrogravitics, we went over vortexing mercury. Now I want to get into the last one called temporal technologies. And temporal basically just meaning time altering. Now, of course, this one is the most theoretical, but there is an amazing amount of research out there to show that technologies altering time and space and time, I'll tell you about the distinctions between those two in a sec here, are absolutely real. Time is not what we're told. Just like gravity is not what we're told, right? Mainstream science has a lot of stuff asked backwards and a lot of stuff they really can't answer these days. This is why this whole, evolution of consciousness that's going on is so exciting, because all of us get to relearn. All of us. So this is, this is why I love doing these whiteboard videos and educating you guys, is because I have to educate myself doing them, and then we all learn together, right? Super fun. But anyway, where was I? Temporal technologies, time-altering technologies. So that's where I was. Time. Time is not what we're told, right? We're told time is linear. You have a straight line, you have forward in the future, back in the past, then you have right now, right? If you're familiar with that quote of former Lockheed Skunk Works director Ben Rich, towards the end of his career, when he would give speeches to groups of people, he would often, towards the very end, he would start joking. And in some of his presentations, at the very last slide, he would put a picture of a flying saucer going out into space, and he would say that we already have the technology to take ET home. And he would say that these questions have already been answered. Somebody asked him one time, they asked him, how is that possible? I believe it was Jan Harzan, the MUFON director. I think he asked Ben Rich, he goes, how is this possible? Are all points in space and time connected? And Ben Rich said, exactly. And that's what it is. All points in space and time are connected. Time is not linear, right? Time is three-dimensional, just like space. Space is three-dimensional. And this is that very theoretical, but also, what do I want to say here? It's far different than anything we've ever been told. And it's very difficult to kind of grasp. But if you've seen the movie Interstellar, that was a good kind of primer as to these kind of concepts. When, spoiler alert, earmuffs if you need to, when, was it Matthew McConaughey was at the very end of the movie when he went into that wormhole, I believe, and then he was kind of floating around and he was able to see different timelines. And this was a very good representation of time being three-dimensional. And to understand this a little bit more so, I want to refer you to the work of Dewey B. Larson. I've done some videos on Dewey B. Larson in the past, and we'll continue to do them. I'll also discuss that in the Secret Space Program webinar I have coming up. But Dewey B. Larson, it's been said that his scientific work, his theory that he called the reciprocal systems theory, is the closest theory we have to reality, to the actual way the universe, crazily enough, works. And his reciprocal systems theory, he was another one that said electricity and gravity are reciprocals, but also he said that space and time were reciprocals, hence reciprocal system theory. And in essence, what he proposed was that there are two different realms of existence. Essentially a physical realm, which is what we're residing in right now, and a metaphysical side of things, or what he termed a material realm right here that we're in, and a cosmic sector. And the material sector is when you have matter moving below the speed of light, and the cosmic sector is when you have stuff moving faster than the speed of light. So right here we have speed of light, and right now we are in the material sector M, which is where space is three-dimensional and time is one-dimensional, right? So we have three dimensions of space, left, right, front, back, up, down, but time is only one-dimensional. We have a future, now, and past. So this is important because a lot of people say there's 5 dimensions, 6 dimensions, all that stuff. I don't necessarily agree. I think there's only 3 dimensions, but there's multiple different densities. There's multiple different ways that energy can be condensed to form different planes of existence. See what I'm saying? Another long tangent that I will not go into. But anyway, we have material realm, 3D space, 1D time. Then we have the cosmic sector that I mentioned. Cosmic sector is when you have 3-dimensional time and 1-dimensional space, right? And remember what I said, speed of light is that boundary between the two. Sometimes it's called the crossing point of light. The speed of light can also vary depending where you are in the galaxy. But mind you, so when you have a craft that you electrify and you create a high energy electromagnetic field around, what does that do? That makes all the particles in that craft vibrate very freaking high, and they vibrate past that crossing point of light, which is why when you delve into researching UFOs and TR3Ds, and by UFOs I mean the man-made and the ET kind, a lot of times they just look like a big old plasma ball, right? They don't even look like a physical material craft, and that's because they're not a material craft. They're dematerializing because that craft is being put into an electromagnetic bubble that's canceling gravity. It's moving that craft past the crossing point of light into the cosmic sector, where it can now navigate through time. Now, I'm not going to get into the discussion of that because navigating time is a very tricky thing to do, of course, but it's absolutely possible, and it has been done. You can look into research on the Philadelphia experiment, which a lot of Nikola Tesla's work, I believe, went into. And oddly enough, I heard that a lot of Wilhelm Reich's research, the psychoanalyst, oddly enough, Wilhelm Reich's research went to the Philadelphia experiment, especially a lot of his stuff on cloud busting technology. I'll have to do more research on that. And also, along with the Philadelphia experiment, Otis Carr you can look into. Speaking of Nikola Tesla, he was actually a protege of Nikola Tesla. So when Nikola Tesla used to live in New York, for a brief period, he lived in a hotel. And in this hotel, one of the workers in the hotel, who was Otis Carr, befriended Tesla and was fascinated with his research. And Tesla then confided a lot of his research into Otis Carr. And in the 50s, Otis Carr took Tesla's research and built literally his own spacecraft. He wanted to build a civilian-led space agency, essentially. He didn't want to deal with the military, the government, or all that jazz. He wanted to build literally his own spacefaring company. Now, of course, Otis Carr got shut down for that and ridiculed and suppressed and whatnot. But his craft that he built one. It was a flying saucer-shaped craft with the same kind of concept with rotating electromagnetic fields, counter-rotating electromagnetic fields. Let me specify, it's important. So we had counter-rotating electromagnetic fields around this saucer craft. It created anti-gravity lift, but this craft also navigated time. And it's been said by a man who worked with Otis Carr, his name was Ralph Ring. I know there's a lot of names and a lot of the info I'm trying to blabber out to you in this video. Ralph Ring. And you can actually look, I believe Ralph Ring is still alive, and he's got plenty of great talks on YouTube. Ralph Ring was a man who worked with Otis Carr, actually flew in Otis Carr's craft, and he said that when they flew and came back, they actually completely lost track of time, And actually, funny enough, Otis Carr's craft involved consciousness interface technology, so actually used crystals in the makeup of it and in the systems. So the consciousness of the human was able to interface with this crystal, and that's how it moved in basics. But it actually could traverse time. I'll, of course, link articles down below. If you don't believe me, you can go look at it. And very real though, right? Consciousness is crucial in understanding the reality of the world, reality of the universe. So that's basically all I wanted to go over with you guys. I hope I had enough clarity going through this all in this video, and I hope it was interesting, because let me tell you, this stuff fascinates me. That's why I was so high energy and just blah 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 all this information at you guys. And I hope it was I hope I had it correct. You know, like I said, I am not any kind of heavily trained physicist. I'm only 27-year-old college dropout, but trying to educate myself with all of this, and heck, maybe even build my own flying saucer one of these days with some T. Townsend Brown and Nikola Tesla research, right? That's what we need to get doing. Enough talk. Now it's time for action, right? Actually learning this stuff and building it. So in the future, you know, one of these days, be pretty neat. But anyway, just letting you know, anti-gravity is real. It's been suppressed for a very long time, but I feel that very soon it's going to be coming out to humanity. And heck, man, I think within my lifetime, I'll be very easily able to travel to distant worlds. Have a good one, guys.